Welcome. I've created a series of open channel flow animations that I'd like to share with you. This animation shows an M2 curve ending in a free overfall. There's also a sluice gate with a fixed opening that pierces the M2 curve and sets up a hydraulic jump. The source of change in this animation is the distance between a free overfall at the downstream end of the channel and a sluice gate. The distance starts at 1,000 meters and reduces to just 5 meters at the end of the video. Before we start the animation, let's first go over the different subfigures that you see on the screen in front of you. So in the upper right, you're looking at the full channel. You can see the channel has a gate that starts at a position of 0 meters and then proceeds to a free overfall at 1,000 meters downstream. It should be obvious, but I'll say it. The flow enters from the left end and proceeds to the right end. If we focus just on the detail very close to the gate, that's what's going on in this whole upper left curve. You can see we're only looking at the first 50 meters downstream from the sluice gate. And so what's going on here is you've got the water surface in blue, you've got in magenta, you've got the actual M3 curve, you've got the hydraulic jump, and then you've got the M2 curve. The remaining magenta that's in dashed form is where the M3 curve would be if the curve could proceed downstream, and then this red curve is the conjugate to that M3 curve. And that's just, it's not a curve that you actually see, but it's the imaginary curve that governs where the hydraulic jump will occur, because where the actual M2 curve intersects that conjugate is where that jump is going to take place. Then we have in the lower part of the screen, we have two graphs of the M2 curve and the M3 curve versus channel length. And so we're just looking at how long is the M2 curve when the channel is 1,000 meters long, 50 meters long, and so forth. And, likewise, how long is the M3 curve when the channel takes on those lengths. Finally, we have a momentum depth, or MY diagram, and an energy depth, or EY diagram. And everything is color-coded here. The magenta you see here and here is the M3 curve. The dark blue that you see here and here is the M2 curve, just as it's shown in the actual illustrations above. Let's set this thing in motion and see what there is to see. So you can see in the macro view, you can see that the channel is getting shorter and shorter, about 500 meters, as I stop it right there. And let's just see what's started to happen here. You can see that the channel is shortened to probably about 500 meters. The M2 curve doesn't quite make it to as great a depth. I should point out, I should have said it earlier, this lower dashed line is critical depth, this upper dashed line is normal depth, so the M2 curve lives in the space between critical and normal depth. When we focus on the more enlarged view near the gate, you can see that the M2 curve, because it's actually slightly smaller depths, is engaging the conjugate to the M3 curve a little further downstream, and therefore the hydraulic jump is actually moving downstream even as the channel itself is getting shorter. And so you can see that the M2 curve is getting shorter as the channel length is getting shorter, and you can see that the M3 curve is actually getting longer as that jump moves downstream. It's not too dramatic yet. It will get more obvious as the evolution goes on. The main thing to see in the EY and MY is we're approaching critical depth in both cases, and if you remember, this jump in the EY diagram was more dramatic, was a greater energy loss at the outset of the animation than where we are now. Let's go forward a bit more, and you can see Everything is progressing. I'm going to wait just a little bit longer. Okay, let me pause there, and you can see basically the whole animation is now contained in the upper left because our free overfall has now moved to just 40 meters downstream from the gate. And so the M2 profile is much shorter than it was at the beginning. And because of that, the M2 curve is getting shorter just because the channel is getting shorter. And then in a small way, you'll notice also that the M3 curve is getting longer as the jump moves further downstream. You can see that that's happening with there's sort of an acceleration in the rate at which the M3 curve is getting longer. And you can see that both from an MY and EY perspective, the jump is from a less supercritical condition to a less subcritical condition. So we're basically approaching critical conditions as the free overfall nears the overall length of the M3 curve, probably around 18, 19 meters from the looks of it. One thing I didn't point out at the outset, but you should be able to see it plainly now, is this M2 curve actually projects back even through to the other side of the gate. Energy is being conserved, and so you can see that the M2 curve projects to the other side of the gate. And if you go back and look at the animation from the beginning, the depth on the other side of the gate started in the animation at something much more like normal depth. Let's let this animation progress a little bit more. I'm going to basically wait till we get to the point that the hydraulic jump disappears. We're getting very close to that moment right about now. There it is. We just lost the hydraulic jump. So you can see that we have basically the longest M3 curve that we could possibly have. You can see on the MY and EY curves that the blue part of the graph has disappeared because basically we just have an M3 curve, and that M3 curve more or less is ending at critical conditions. This figure is no longer interesting to look at, but you can see now that any further loss of channel will just mean a shorter M3 curve, because the M3 curve, basically, because it's supercritical, it doesn't feel what's going on downstream until it gets there. The M3 curve is just going to shoot off to oblivion, whether the channel is 18 meters long or 10 meters long, or at the very end of the animation, 5 meters long. Let's head to that point and see this animation through to the end. And you can see that the M3 curve is just moving to shallower depths on both the EY and MY diagrams. And there it is. We've reached the end of the animation. And so our M2 curve basically diminished from its full length of the channel, almost 1,000 meters, to nothing. Our M3 curve, meanwhile, grew longer as the channel length grew shorter, till we maxed out around 18 meters, and then it grew shorter after that because there just wasn't channel for the M3 curve to live on. And so with that, let me thank you for watching, and let me know if you have any questions in the comment area below. Also, you can click in the description to this video to learn more about the parameters of the video and see links to my book, see links to other videos that explain other concepts from my book.